Everyone slept well? I'm seriously asking. See, I have a 4-year-old son and a 6-year-old startup I need to worry about, so there is not much sleep going on for me. But anyway, this is me. I really don't quite get why people put pictures of themselves in their slides. But yeah, this is me 365 days ago and 10 kilos ago. Quite proud of that. The gentleman on the left, actually, funny enough, it's called Dan Brown. If you see him with the same shirt, just so you know, he has like 3 of them. So don't worry, I know he consistently washes them. Okay, so getting a little bit serious. I've been working in HashiCorp for about 2 years, though you may not see me a lot because I'm actually on the other side of the ocean. I'm there. Can you see Wally? That's basically where I am, a little bit of zoom there. So that's actually where I live. Now, in a world of privacy and so on, not a lot of people would feel comfortable doing that. I actually do, and here's why. I don't live in 10 acres, as you can see, all gray. I actually live in a new neighborhood. But no one can find my address because neither Google or Apple have updated their maps. So if Amazon Prime can find me, I'm pretty sure you guys can't. So the whole excuse of this talk, to be absolutely serious, is there anyone from Google or Apple in the room? Can you please draw my street? I want to get mail. It's fine. All right, a little bit of a disclaimer. I'm Argentinian by birth and Italian by blood, so you will see me do a lot of this. We kind of talk with hands. It's pretty common. That's why they gave me the big room. They don't want me hitting anyone. English is not my first language, so if there is anything you don't understand, I'll do my best to repeat myself. If you look puzzled, I know that I switch languages. I am not a developer at all. I actually come from an ops background. I work at Red Hat, IBM. So I don't do coding for a living. I mostly do coding to annoy people. Mostly our Vault developers. If you see Chris, one of our Vault developers, he'll explain what I'm talking about. This morning, he told me, stop sending commits. And please don't criticize my language choices on some of the examples I'm going to show you. I had basically a week in Christmas to do this. I didn't finish. We have new people still asking, wouldn't it be cool to have an app that does this? And everyone laughs. And I go well, we're 3 months away from Christmas, so who knows, I might finish it. The same thing I'm going to show you, you can do in a plethora of languages. We have client libraries for, almost any programming languages, even ones I haven't heard about. But, let's talk about the story. So my organization is called Solutions Engineering, and we sometimes have to prepare these special documents for customers, which is pretty much a copy and paste process. And for the longest time, we were like, wouldn't it be cool to actually have a tool that does that for us, that basically takes a template, render, interpolates values, and then creates a neat PDF that we can send to customers so we can explain what we're doing with them. And as usual, we're not a team of developers, so we don't have time to write this. We don't have time to maintain this. So it's like, let's make a tool that does it and make it as zero touch as possible. But at the same time, we want to use all the, let's say, new and funky development practices. So we actually want to make an app that is based on microservices that talk to each other, that is containerized, all the neat little buzzwords that you hear day in and day out. So when I set myself up to start this project, I started thinking about the advice I generally give to people using HashiCorp tools and see how that actually applied to me. So to start, I'm going to talk about 2 things that are not development specific or not even HashiCorp specific, but are pretty important. The first one is contracts, and it's not the ones that the suits prepare. It's the internal contracts you have in your own organization. When you're about to consume a service from your organization, you need to at least understand, where do you start? And with our tools in particular, it's quite important because, for example, if you're consuming a secret from Vault, you need to understand, where is my starting point? Do I have a Vault token available in my pod or my EC2 instance or my virtual machine in Azure? Do I need to do that logging process? Those kind of contracts need to be set in advance. Whoever is running the capability for you, and even if you're running it like small in your own team, you need to set a starting point in terms of from where am I going to start to continue this workflow, okay? So first thing, read carefully, agree your contract within your organization, understand, okay, this is what I expect. When I get a resource, when I get a VM, when I deploy a pod, I am going to have these things available to me to actually go ahead and consume anything further. Now, it might be the case if you're a small enough organization or you're lean enough that you actually have your vault ready, and we're 10, so this is not a problem. This will become a problem in the future when you're over 10, so start thinking about these things now. We're going to go back to this contract a couple of times during this presentation to talk about a couple of things you need to be aware before you start any kind of development process. But the second important thing I want to talk about is abstractions, which is one of the coolest thing that you have when you develop. I'm serious. Like I'm not particularly a Java guy, but this is seriously the best thing to come out of Java. Like the fact that you can use in-language abstractions in code. So even when you write your own abstractions, the first thing you want is you want your code to be readable. You want other people to be able to use it. And particularly in my case, I was writing an application that people in my team were potentially going to maintain, but I need to make it really easy to them. So abstract your code from locking every single time you can, because these are the kind of things that come back to bite you. Use existing libraries whenever possible. Just be aware that some libraries may be a little bit opinionated in the way you do things. I actually had this discussion in HashiCorp a couple of times, particularly about Rails. So Rails is great to develop a web app, but ultimately it kind of locks you into a particular pattern. Like it makes assumptions. Okay, so if you're using Rails and if you're using, for example, session management, we assume that we have like a SQL persistence, right? So if you're using Rails, you must have a PostgreSQL or a MySQL or whatever. And honestly, my application wasn't that complex. So I didn't want to do that. But even then, I wanted to abstract from the storage layer. So actually, I wrote 10 lines of code that does that for me. I basically created like a persistence abstraction that in this case is just storing stuff in S3. And I created 3 functions. I created a store, retrieve, and list, because that's all I need from my storage backend. I'm going to be writing JSON documents, and in the future, this might be big enough where I need to move to Mongo, for example. So I don't want to go back to my code and review every single part of my code to see where I'm doing it right. So basically, I just invest 15 minutes in writing a library that does that for me, okay? Which is quite specific to my application, but ultimately, if I want to migrate my application from, in this case, was S3 to any other object store, I can just modify those 10 lines, and that's it. My application keeps working. I don't have to change any more code. So talking about this application, let me tell you a little bit about the assumptions I had. So my team kind of maintains a Vault and Consul capability because we use it for demos and we use it to try things. And I had basically everything that was available in AWS. So I knew I could persist stuff in S3. And I also have Nomad as a scheduler. So basically, I had almost all the underpinnings I need in terms of infrastructure. So the only thing I needed to write, and the only thing I actually wanted to write, is a little bit of business logic that did whatever I needed. So from there on, I started looking at basically, OK, how am I going to actually code this? And as you can imagine, the first problem that I go through is basically secrets. Funny, ironically, secrets management seems to be the thing on everyone's mouth. We keep talking about secrets. And in my case, I had to manage a considerable number of secrets. So I have AWS credentials to actually deploy this. I had AWS credentials to access the S3 bucket. I had JWT, signer and issuer. I had the Google API credentials because honestly, most common login method we have is Google. So ultimately, I need to store some way to talk to the Google API in terms of doing logins and so on, and I needed crypto. Okay, because I might be storing some sensitive data, and even if I'm not, I actually want my information to be encrypted. Now, when I talk about crypto, and I know I'm in Silicon Valley, I want to clarify what I mean by crypto. I mean the art of writing or solving codes. This has nothing to do with cryptocurrency. I need the capability to actually encrypt information in transit. Now, traditionally, in the data center, crypto has been limited to this. Like, if you have your storage, you tick your box, and all your information is just encrypted at rest. Okay, this is what regulatory requirements ask us. Your information must be encrypted at rest. Now, I tend to say the same thing. Do you know what protects your information at rest better than cryptography? Take a guess. It's actually this guy. He looks really tough. But when let's say, a curious individual that Hollywood has portrayed as hacker wants to take your data, he's not going to go and vulnerate your physical security to try to get it. Okay, this is stock photo, by the way. I don't know this guy, but he's not going to try to go to a data center and steal a hard drive. What he's actually going to try to do is most likely either try to find a way to vulnerate the logic of your application, or if it is a disgruntled employee, an internal attacker, before they leave, they are going to just do a SQL dump and just take it with you. So the most common scenario is you end up in something like this, which is pretty common. Okay, you get a SQL injection, you have an unescaped string in your code, and basically someone puts a semicolon select star from table, and boom, all your data is out. The clear way to address this is actually not having some sort of transparent encryption. It's actually doing encryption in your application, which has other kind of complexities, like, for example, where am I going to put my crypto material? And if you read, there is a blog in the UK called The Register, which is basically IT news. Basically, they have a posting every week for some encryption keys that were leaked in because someone left an S3 bucket open. Okay. People don't know and have a problem actually managing that crypto material. And that's problem number one. Problem number two is that probably your cryptographic functions need to be audited to ensure you're doing it right. Now, funny enough, Vault actually provides you with a capability to do this, and it's pretty easy to set up. As I suck at doing live demos, I actually did a GIF. So you can actually send this to whoever manages your Vault. But ultimately, Vault has this thing called the transit engine, where you just provision encryption keys. And what you're going to do is quite simple. It brings you two endpoints, an encrypt and the crypt endpoint. So basically, the standard of security is already set by someone managing your Vault. Your keys are stored in Vault. They never need to go there. And what you just do is, through the API, send a value and get an encrypted value back. That's basically all you need. So in my application, as you can imagine, I just do that. I basically, before writing something, I just, translate it to Vault. And this is the way I should do it, right? Yes? Where are you not paying attention? Abstractions. I don't want to log myself into Vault. So basically, I created a function in my application for my code. So if tomorrow I want to go from Vault, well, I work from HashiCorp, so please don't go away from Vault. But if you want to go away from Vault and go into KMS or Azure Key Vault, or maybe you are using KMS and you actually don't want to log yourself into AWS, well, this is what you do. Just put a little bit of code that abstract you. So basically, if you change crypto capability, you change one bit of your code, not your whole code. I did a lot of those. So basically, this is my Vault object in code. And when I need basically encrypt or decrypt values, I just call vault.encrypt or vault.decrypt. Easy to read, easy to maintain, easy to move away from Vault. Okay. If I need my Google credentials, I read a specific path. If I need my JWT secrets, I read a specific path, and so on. So the next aspect, let's go back to the contract for a second, is how is this application getting access to Vault? If you have used Vault or you have used Consul, you know that we need to identify whatever is consuming that capability in order to basically give them access to crypto, give them access to secret, and so on. Before I give you a secret, I have to know who you are. And in my case, my runtime was Nomad. So in Nomad, it's actually pretty simple. You just tell it what secret it needs or under what policy it's going to be. And in my case, I'm consuming a couple of things from the application, like, for example, a memcache layer. Now, the beauty about Consul and service discovery is that we even had the indecency of putting a DNS interface into it. So I don't need to even go to the Consul API and check where is the service. I can just pass a DNS name, which is basically what your application is doing right now. Now, I understand that not everyone is using Nomad. I know there is like another popular kid on the block, whatever my personal opinion is on that. So what if I'm using Kubernetes? Well, I know if you heard Arman yesterday, but we solved 4 discrete problems. So we don't care how you solve maybe the other 3. Okay? And if you're using Kubernetes, a good option is just using a Kubernetes authentication method. When your container comes up, you just go and do a secure introduction of that container. Be a method that is already available, and that container gets a token. If you want something a little bit less invasive, maybe what you can do is basically use something that we have called Consul template, which I'm going to go in depth a little bit later, to deploy a Helm chart with secrets. Or there is another option, which actually Nick, who I think you all saw, he basically has this pattern where he has this Helm chart that basically runs the container as a sidecar with Consul template, and then mounts the file with secrets. So basically, the secrets are given into the pod without the need of modifying anything in your pod. So it's quite a cool pattern. If you're using something like AWS, you can also have that AWS EC2 instance with a login. Same with Azure, same with Google, same with Ali Cloud. Ultimately, we have multiple authentication methods in order to find out who you are and what kind of secret I can get you. Now, the beauty of this is if you're using Vault, once I identified you, I can get you all kinds of secrets. I can get you your Consul token, I can get you your Nomad token, I can get you database credentials. That's it. Secret problem over. There is one interesting engineering point that I want to make. The thing about Vault is that it gives you credentials, and you can have like a very short ETL, let's say 8 hours. And you fall very quickly in the trap of saying, I'm going to just every 8 hours ask for new credentials. It requires a lot of logic that I'm not sure you actually want to make the investment in your application to go and say, I'm going to go and rotate my secrets every 8 hours. Because every time I do a presentation on Vault, I ask people to raise hands how many rotate their machine credentials every year. And like maybe 10% raise their hand. So if you want to go from like every N to 8 hours, I think that's too steep. And it will add a considerable amount of effort in your application development. Just to show you an example, this is what I'm doing in my application, basically. I'm just checking if my credentials work. And if they don't work, I just get a new set of credentials and try to connect again. It's pretty simple. And the second pattern you see on your right, thank you. I actually wrote that for my HashiCorp job interview a while ago. But it's still a lot of code that you actually have to maintain. So the most, I would say, amicable pattern I've been suggesting is like if you deploy your application every 30 days, just make your Vault tokens last 45. By the time you redeploy, you get new credentials, and the old credentials just expire. So just make it easy on you to maintain moving forwards. Another interesting aspect of this is for people that are not developers, like myself. There are a lot of organizations that still work. I'm not going to say a full waterfall model, but basically they have a team that writes an application, and then they chuck it over the fence to ops, and then ops has to go and deploy it and handle configuration and handle secrets, and so on. So they don't actually have access to modify the application and to have it consume credentials from Vault. So a good example of something you can do is use Consul template, which is this binary that takes configuration from Consul and takes secrets from Vault and just renders a configuration file template. Which is basically what your application has been doing so far. There is an excellent guide that a member of my team wrote, who's in Paris, about how to do that with PKI. So basically, Apache or Nginx is a great example of things that you cannot modify to load certificates. So basically, what he does with Consul template is render the key, the certificate, and the CA on predictable patterns, and as Consul template is talking to Vault, every time that certificate expires, it's going to render a new set of certificates and restart Apache or Nginx. Okay, so that is completely frictionless. The other alternative, generally, when you're using applications, is that you pass secrets or configuration through environment variables. So we have mconsul, which is a similar pattern, but basically uses environment variables. Enough with secrets, please. Some more interesting aspects is, for example, locking. These are locks in France, actually. There is a large canal where you actually have to go through locks to get through the canal. In this case, locks are very important to avoid ships crashing into each other. In application development, it's actually quite similar. So in my case, remember that in my application, we were writing documents, and those documents take a bit of time, and you may need to collaborate. So, I need to find a way to basically, if someone was writing or modifying a document, for someone else not to go put a quick change, save it, and then get overwritten, and so on. And Consul is actually perfect for doing that. Because, quick example here, you can basically set a lock in Consul. Diplomat is the name of the Ruby gem that interfaces with Consul. Again, there are others. But basically, you can put a lock in Consul. And in my case, I patched when someone opened a document for updating. I basically added a version in the code. I added a line in the code that said, just go and lock this registry. And when someone tries to do another update, it's basically going to do the same thing. It's going to basically wait for a lock. So basically, the browser is going to go in a white until it times out because the web server is not going to respond. It's not a great pattern, but then again, I had a week to write it. But ultimately, you can use these logs. And if someone forgets this, these logs expire every once in a while. So ultimately, you can do a finer-grained management of those logs. Another interesting pattern is about load balancing. So I had to load balance multiple instances of my application, which are coming out in multiple systems. If you haven't heard about Fabio, Fabio is just awesome. It's this binary. It's being used by eBay that I know of. The guy that wrote it is actually in the Netherlands, but he's German. He's a fantastic guy. And basically, it takes whatever you have in Consul in terms of service registration and load balances. It's absolutely fantastic. It's not the only great pattern. Armand particularly is in love with this pattern that one of the European banks is doing. But they're doing basically the same thing with Nginx. So they have Nginx. They basically, every time there is a new service, Consul template just re-renders the Nginx configuration file and does a restart. So it's actually pretty cool. And Consul on its own is like a great Swiss Army knife tool of things you can use, because you may have heard of Consul as service discovery or the key value, or you're seeing Connect now, which is awesome, but it has some things that not a lot of people are aware. The KV store or doing blocking queries. Basically, I have my application, I read a value, and Consul is going to leave the connection open until that value changes, and then it's going to drop the connection. So basically, by putting a rescue and generating a new connection, I get a new value. Really cool stuff. Prepare queries, which is basically, you can use it for great patterns like geofailover. You can do leader election with Consul. There are lots of things in Consul that you can use to make your life easier when developing an application. About halfway to writing this, we had our CI, but we didn't have an artifact registry, so I was using the Docker Hub to build a container. So please really don't do this at home, but within the application, what I basically did is when I receive a webhook from the Docker Hub, basically, I'm going to redeploy the whole thing. I'm going to render the template of a Nomad job. And the cool thing is the application actually can get Nomad credentials to do its own deployment. It's not a great pattern, but yeah, don't do this at home. So where I got after 15 days of coding is that basically I had 100% of code that was business code. Okay? And I wasn't trusting that anything would provide me any kind of resiliency or any kind of security. The data is encrypted at rest and in transit in JSON documents that I just load and decrypt when I need to. If someone, for some reason, made my S3 bucket public, they will just see gibberish because the data is decrypted by the application through Vault. All credentials are ephemeral or short-lived, so even if I disclose an error on, I don't know, a log or an error message, basically I can go and just revoke them. I had microservices that are loosely coupled, and they can talk to each other via Consul, and I could run this wherever, okay, which was kind of one of the main things, because right now, I had an AWS account, but tomorrow, I know we may want to focus on doing stuff on Azure, and I can just move it around. Some other interesting stuff that I've been thinking before next Christmas, so I can start writing, is that I already have a scheduler running, which is Nomad. There are certain processes that I'm doing kind of interactively in the code, like generating a PDF. That takes a long time, and it's a dreadful experience. And it's worth noting, did I mention that I have a scheduler? So basically, that PDF process, I can just throw a task to the scheduler to generate it offline and leave it somewhere predictable when it's done. And that's the beauty of using a scheduler in general. There are a lot of things that generally in your application you do in an interactive way. You can start thinking about splitting those, because access to the scheduler is via an API. So ultimately, if there are certain tasks that is not worth doing interactively, don't do them interactively. Just throw another job to the scheduler, get it to run, and then load it either asynchronously or in a predictable manner. The other aspect was just the sheer amount of configuration that I had to do in terms of doing kind of mutual TLS, and even for kind of commercial off-the-shelf services like Memcache. Even if most of my data was encrypted in transit, I still wanted to use TLS. So I have Vault generating all these certificates, and I seriously want to stop that nightmare. But again, we launched Connect in, I want to say May in Amsterdam, or June. May? Thank you. So we launched Connect in May. And I already have Consul there. So basically, the only thing I need to do is just start using the proxies. And hopefully, that will make my life better, and I don't have to maintain so many certificates. I really, really hope these patterns were useful to you. I'm going to be roaming around the conference if you have any questions. So I honestly want to help you. Thank you for listening to me ramble for about 40 minutes. And with that, thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to take them. I know we have. OK, I don't know, Christy, do we have microphones, or you just yell? All right, good. Thank you. I'll be around if you need to ask anything.